In this video, we'll be looking at a few more tips and tricks for creating graphs in Excel. So the first thing to be aware of is when you're creating, for instance, a graph with several numbers and then you've also totaled them as well, it's important that you don't actually include the total when you're creating the graph, because I'll show you what happens there. If you insert a normal graph, so for instance a pie chart for that, if I had included the totals as well and then inserted a pie chart, it will create this orange piece which is the total, and that is adding up everything on the other side. So it looks quite silly, and it's the same problem with other chart types as well, that you get this bar that is just a total of the others, and it totally messes up everything there as well. So if I change this one, we can compare more directly. So you can see the two don't really match up very well. So it's always important to just check that. You can edit the data that you've included by using the select data option, and then you can actually go and change and reselect the data that you've done, and it will change the chart as well. Another thing that you may need to do is to select data that's not adjacent to each other. So here I've got my headings right at the top, and far down I've got the totals that I want to graph. So what I can do in this case is select the headings that I want, scroll down to the relevant data, and then hold the Control key on the keyboard and then select the data, making sure that this is the same size as the original selection. Now I can go and insert whatever chart is recommended. We'll do a pie chart again. And you can see when you select the chart, it does highlight the data that was involved. So there's the headings, and then all the way down there is the data itself. Another thing that you can use with the select data button, if you, for instance, forget or don't select the headings in the first place, you'll get a chart that has something like series 1 or just 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can use the select data button to go and edit the data source. And you can see here we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4. So I simply click on edit, and then I select the headings that I want, and it will immediately update that. So now my chart looks correct. I can also use this option switch row and column data, which, as you can see at the moment, this is grouped by the type of product that was recycled, paper, cans, plastic, etc. If I switch that, it will change it to grouping it by year. And then you can compare year on year instead of by type. So it really depends on what you're trying to show. Some graphs will make more sense one way and others will make more sense the other way. You can also do a few more things with charts. For instance, we've got this precipitation and humidity chart here, and we can actually change this so that it contains two types of charts, and that's called a combo chart. So I'm going to change the chart type here, and you'll see the last option is a combo chart, and then you can, for instance, have a column and line chart. And here we can choose, we can also actually change what each part is, but I'm going to use a column and line chart like that. And you can turn on whether it has a secondary axis, which will then actually combine the data in perhaps a more appealing sort of way. So now if I change this, now we've got two graphs on top of each other showing different things, and the precipitation is here on the left and we've got the humidity percentage on the right. And you may wish to label these axes so it's more clear as well, but and of course you can just do that with the chart elements button here, add some axis titles and so on and so forth. Now there will be a primary and secondary horizontal and vertical options. We can also manipulate the way that the charts are displayed to make them perhaps exaggerate certain parts of the data. So for instance, we can edit this axis here. If we right click on it and go to Format, Axis, and you've got your options on the right hand side, and you can actually change what the minimum maximum are as well as what the units are if you want to. But if you change the minimum, so for instance if we make it 40, we're going to get a very different picture. We make the maximum, let's say 90. And suddenly we have a very extreme sort of variation here, and suddenly it looks like the English mark is extremely low compared to, for instance, the life orientation mark, and the whole thing is actually quite extreme. If we change this to a line chart, it would be even more obvious how extreme the changes are, even though we're only looking at a 40, we've got 45 and 85 there, so we're only looking at 40 points difference there, but because we've adjusted the actual axis, then it's made it look much more exaggerated. And so if we change it, for instance, to be 30, it will look a bit less extreme. If we change it back to 0, suddenly it doesn't look as dramatic. So that's how it is possible to actually manipulate and exaggerate parts of graphs, just based on what you're showing there. And if we do something like go and hide the axes, then suddenly you've actually got a very dramatic looking thing, or maybe we would leave the horizontal axis. But if we hid those numbers there, then it looks like quite a dramatic picture, even though it wasn't really that extreme when we started. So it is possible to manipulate what a graph is showing. The final thing I want to show here is that you can copy and paste graphs into Word or PowerPoint or something, but you can also link them. So you can simply copy them, and then when you come into Word, you have different paste options here, keeping the source formatting, linking the data. There's two options there with the link data. It's got a little link icon. You can also insert it as a solid picture that's then no longer a chart. It actually becomes a picture there. If we compare that to pasting it as a linked chart, then when we click on it, we get chart design and format, as opposed to the picture, which gives us picture format. So the main difference here is if you resize the chart one, then it will adjust the contents to fit the area, whereas if you resize the image, it always stays the same in proportion to the original. So whatever works for you. Obviously this one that's linked will then update if we updated the data in our chart. So if I come here and make this quite a much lower number, you can see this middle bar has gone smaller, and in the linked chart here, it is smaller, whereas the original was up there at 60. So those are just some of the things that you can do with charts beyond just a basic inserting them.